You've probably heard the myth. The potato chip was invented by an angry chef. But what if I told you its real history starts decades earlier in London, 1817, with a cookbook and some goose fat? Welcome to Who Came Up With That, the show where we dig into the strange, surprising, and snackable stories behind everyday stuff. Today, we trace the entire history of the potato chip, from its actual birth in the 1800s to the international flavor circus it is today. Potato chips. Who came up with that? Today's episode is going to be a little bit different than the first two that we put out here, where this one's emphasized a little bit more on going into a little bit more detail, so it's going to be longer than the 13 minutes that the other episodes was. So if you're listening to this, let me know which one you guys prefer, the shorter ones or maybe the little bit longer ones that dive in a little bit more of the history. So let's get started. Before, though, we get into the sweet and salty history of the potato chip, let's take a look at the origins of the actual potato. Native to the Andean region of South America, the potato was cultivated by the Inca as early as 8000 BCE. It arrived in Europe in the 16th century, brought to Spanish explorers, but it wasn't exactly a hit at first. Many Europeans thought it was poisonous. But eventually the potato became a staple food across Ireland, Germany, and Russia due to its nutritional density and its ability to grow in rough soil. Not long after, people started playing around with different recipes, and as they say, the rest is history. Alright, so picture this. It's a cozy London kitchen, 1817. No Netflix, no DoorDash, just a stove and a whole lot of potatoes. And that's exactly where we find the earliest known recipe for the potato chip. Yep, long before vending machines and foil bags, this crunchy delight made its debut in a British bestseller called The Cook's Oracle by a guy named William Kitchener. Now, Kitchener, he wasn't just some random guy messing around in the kitchen. His cookbook was a hit on both sides of the Atlantic. It flew off shelves in the UK and the US, and in that 1822 edition, he gave us a very clear blueprint for crispy potato magic. In it, he wrote, "Peel large potatoes, cut them in shavings, round and round, as you would peel a lemon. Dry them well in a clean cloth, and fry them in lard or dripping." Honestly, that still sounds delicious. Just imagine spiraled potato shavings, golden and hot from the fryer. Simple, yet brilliant. And just a few years later, in 1825, another book popped up. This time focused on French cooking. It called them pommes de terre frites, or fried potatoes. And the method? Thin slices, cooked in clarified butter or goose dripping, drained once crisp, then sprinkled with salt. So whether you were in England or borrowing from the French, crispy potato slices were very much a thing already. Over in the U.S., recipes started showing up not long after. Mary Randolph's Virginia housewife dropped in 1824 with a potato chip recipe. And just like N.K.M. Lee's Cook's Own book from 1832, it gave full credit to Kitchener. Now, here's where things get crunchy. You've probably heard a certain origin story about potato chips, the one with a dramatic restaurant standoff in Saratoga Springs, New York. It goes like this. It's 1853, a fussy diner at Moon's Lake House. He keeps sending back his fried potatoes. "They're too thick," he says. "Too soggy. Not enough salt." The cook, George Crumb, he finally has had enough. So what does he do? He slices those potatoes paper thin, fries them into crispy oblivion, and hits them with a heavy hand of salt. And wouldn't you know it, the customer loves them. Thus, the Saratoga chip was born. Or was it? Yeah, it turns out that tale is mostly myth. It didn't surface until decades after it supposedly happened. And while it's fun, historians have poked some big old holes in it. For one, Cornelius Vanderbilt, the guy often named as the picky customer, he was reportedly in Europe at the time. Also, the Moons didn't even own the lake house until 1854. And get this, crispy fried potatoes were already being served in Saratoga before that date. Still, the story stuck. In fact, in 1973, a packaging company called St. Regis Paper Company, they used it in a national ad campaign, claiming the chip was born in that very restaurant showdown. So even though it's not actually true, the tale of George Crumb and the birth of the Saratoga chip, it became chip folklore. and it lingered well into the 20th century. But the potato chips roots go way deeper than that one cranky diner in New York. Well, up until this point, if you wanted potato chips, you were either dining somewhere upscale, frying them at home with a tub of lard, or maybe, just maybe, snagging a bag from a local snack maker. But all that started to change when some early innovators saw potential in turning these crispy little slices of heaven into a full-blown business. Enter the Granite State Potato Chip Factory based in New Hampshire. Founded way back in 1905, this company was one of America's first official potato chip manufacturers. That's right, they were churning out chips before most people even had refrigerators in their homes. Granite State ran strong for over 100 years, cranking out bags of salty goodness until they finally closed up shop in 2007. So if you've ever had a Granite State chip, consider yourself part of snacking history. But they weren't the only game around. Over in Dayton, Ohio, another chip titan was rising. In 1910, the Mike Sells Potato Chip Company fired up its fryers, and it's still going today. They proudly call themselves the oldest potato chip company in the United States. And honestly, they've earned it. Alright, well now we got that out of the way, let's rewind to a time when getting your hands on a bag of chips wasn't as simple as walking into a gas station and grabbing a snack-sized foil bag off the rack. Nope. Back in the early days, buying chips was a whole thing, a whole process. Before mass packaging came along, chips were scooped out of glass bins in shop windows or sold in big old tins. And deliveries were made by horse and wagon. So, if you wanted your salty fix, it might arrive alongside a bale of hay, who knows? Now, the packaging situation, let's just say it had some issues. Those early tins and barrels, they weren't exactly chip-friendly. By the time you got to the bottom, your snack had basically turned into a sad pile of stale potato dust. Crumbs everywhere, freshness long gone. Then came wax paper. Better, but still not ideal. Early bags were folded up and either ironed or stapled at the ends, definitely an upgrade. But chips still didn't stay fresh for very long. And that's where one seriously clever woman, she changed the game forever. Enter Laura Scudder. We're in Monterey Park, California in the 1920s. Laura, she was an entrepreneur with a small chip business and big problem. How do you keep potato chips fresh and unbroken long enough to sell them at scale? Her solution was absolutely genius. She started sending her workers home with sheets of wax paper and asked them to iron them into bags at night. Then the next day, those bags were filled with chips at her factory. And then boom, homemade, hand-sealed freshness. This method helped reduce crumbling, kept the chips crisp way longer, and most importantly, opened the door for potato chips to become a mass-market snack. Combine that with the rising popularity of cellophane, and suddenly, chips, they had the shelf life and presentation needed to go national. Well, flash forward to today, and chip packaging has leveled up. Now your average bag is made of plastic with a high-tech twist. Before they seal it, they pump nitrogen gas into the bag, which is not to cook the chips, obviously. It's there to keep them fresh and protect them from being smashed in transit. That puffed up bag, it ain't just regular air. That's snack preservation science. So from scoops out of storefront bins and rusty tins to high-tech nitrogen-sealed bags, the way we've packaged potato chips has come a long way. And we've got people like Laura Scudder to thank, turning iron wax paper into a revolutionary snack time solution. And you want to talk about revolutionary, let's talk about the flavors. Because believe it or not, for the few first decades of their crunchy little lives, it was just potato chips, oil, and maybe salt if you're lucky. But all that changed thanks to a twist of genius, literally. We're in London, the year's 1920. Frank Smith, the guy behind Smith's Potato Crisp Company Limited, he decides it's time to class things up. Instead of handing people oily paper cones or scoops of chips from a barrel, Frank starts packing his crisps into grease-proof paper bags. And here's the twist. Inside each bag, he includes a little blue packet of salt. You'd pour the salt in and give the bag a shake, and voila, seasoned chips. Sort of. It's still just salt, but it was revolutionary at the time. Frank Smith was basically the original DIY flavor packet guy. Londoners loved it, and his chips quickly became a staple across the city. But as far as real flavor, like actual seasoning, that wouldn't happen for another few decades. So we'll fast forward to 1954, and now we're heading west over to Ireland. A man named Joe Spud Murphy, yes, that was his actual nickname, and yes, it's amazing. Well, he owned a crisp company called Tato. He and his flavor hacking partner, Seamus Burke, they were on a mission to change the chip game forever. And guess what? They did. After some serious trial and error, they cracked it. The world's first truly seasoned chip. The flavor? Cheese and onion. Suddenly, chips had character. They had attitude. And it wasn't just Ireland that noticed. Snack companies all over the globe were scrambling to get their hands on Tato's flavor and method. It was the start of something big. Well, back in England, Walkers of Leicester, they jumped on board that same year and started producing their own cheese and onion crisps. And then, here comes the flavor wars. Golden Wonder, which is Smith's biggest rival at the time, they weren't about to let Walkers have all the fun. They launched cheese and onion too. Smith's responded by doubling down on innovation, and they debuted a new flavor that would go on to split snackers down the middle even to this day. Salt and vinegar. It was bold. It was tangy. It started out as a test run from their Northeast England subsidiary Tudor, and then it exploded in popularity. By 1967, salt and vinegar had gone national, and the chip flavor arms race was officially on. It lasted for 2 decades, and still even going today, if you want to be honest. Meanwhile, across the pond in the United States, things were heating up there too. By 1954, the same year cheese and onion hit shelf in Ireland, barbecue-flavored chips were being sold in the United States. It's not totally clear who was first, but one name that stands out is Hers, the Pennsylvania-based chip maker. In 1958, they became the first company to officially introduce barbecue-flavored chips in the state. And just like that, Americans had their own bold flavored entry into the global chip scene. From Frank Smith's twist to salt in a London lunch bag, to Joe Spud Murphy's cheese and onion revolution in Ireland, to barbecue hitting shelves in Pennsylvania, the potato chip had become a flavor playground, and let's be honest, it hasn't stopped since. Let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into these flavors, and boy, are there a lot, especially in different countries around the world, and some of them are just downright gross. We'll say that. First, we're going to head across the pond, if you're listening in America, to the United Kingdom, where the chip scene is a whole different flavor fiesta. First, they don't call them chips, they call them crisps. And the king of crisps, that would be Walkers, we mentioned them. Walkers, they don't mess around with flavor. Sure, they've got the basics, the salt and vinegar, ready salted, cheese and onion. But they've also gone full culinary explorer. We're talking prawn cocktail, beef and onion, roast chicken, smoky bacon, Worcestershire sauce, pickled onion, tomato ketchup. And that's just the snacky stuff. Then there's the exotic lineup, which honestly reads like a fancy pub menu. Thai sweet chili, roast pork and creamy mustard sauce, chicken with Italian herbs, spicy sriracha, barbecue pulled pork, sea salt and cider vinegar, spicy and aromatic curry, turkey and bacon, caramelized onion and sweet balsamic vinegar, Stilton and cranberry. Yeah, Stilton, the cheese. Over in Ireland, things are a little different, but equally obsessed. There, the word Tato isn't just a brand, it's basically a national identity. People don't say crisps, they just say Tato's, even if the bag isn't from the Tato brand. That's like calling every soda a Coke. It's cultural. Other Irish favorites, Hunky Dory's and King, both proudly homegrown and packed with attitude and flavor. Let's hop over to Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands, where paprika is the star of the show over there. In those countries, the go-to flavors are salted and sweet paprika, which is sometimes called Ungarisch, which means Hungarian in German. But that's just the baseline. German chip producers have also brought some bold and honestly pretty wild flavors to the table themselves. You'll find sour cream and onion, cheese, oriental, but then things get extra with chakalaka, which is a spicy South African relish, currywurst, a beloved German street food, Palms, yes, chips that taste like French fries, go figure, and Rotweiss, that's red and white, aka fries with ketchup and mayo. Meanwhile, in Belgium and the Netherlands, Bolognese chips are a real thing. And it ain't just a gimmick, it's actually a popular flavor. That trend started with a Belgian company called Crocky. Now, for something totally different, in Russia, this is where chip flavors get aquatic. The brand Russkaya Kardoshka, they offer seafood-inspired crisps like grilled salmon, shrimp, Kamchatk's crab, which is named after the Russian Far East legendary crabbing region, And they're not just any chips. They're shaped like tight little sea curls, almost ball-shaped, with reduced oil. You could say it's Russia's take on the healthier chip. Meanwhile, Lay's brand in Russia has its own exclusive flavors like crab, green onion, no cream included, and a whole line called Izpechi, which means from the stove. Less oily, same crunch, still with the crab flavor, of course. Then there's the boldest entry of them all, the Just Brutal brand. Their chips, pitch black. Yeah, black. And the flavor's just as edgy as the color. There's vinegar and Thai sweet pepper. So whether you're in Dublin or Dusseldorf, Moscow or Manchester, the potato chip isn't just a snack, it's a passport, a flavor vehicle, if you will. A crunchy little window into regional cravings, local pride, and some truly inventive food science. Alright, so we've talked about how potato chips are invented, flavored, packaged, and shipped across the world. But here's a question you might not have thought to ask. What do you even call them? Yeah, sure, chips if you're in America. But, depending on where you are elsewhere in the world, asking for a bag of chips might get you a very different snack, or even a basket of fries. Now, we know in America they're called chips, but hop a little bit north into Canada and things start to get a little bit tricky. Canadians, they also use the word chips, but they might use it for French fries, especially the thicker pub-style ones. So depending on where you're ordering, chips might be salty, thin, and crunchy, or thick, hot, and served next to gravy. And then there's crisps. The word gets tossed around too, especially for snacks that aren't exactly sliced potatoes. Think like Pringles, for example. We'll get to them later. Well, let's fly over to the UK and Ireland, where everything flips. There, the word crisps is used for what Americans call chips. And chips, those are what we know as French fries, the kind you get with fish and chips. Over in Australia, New Zealand, and parts of South Africa, India, and the West Indies, including Barbados, the situation gets even more, let's say, relaxed. There, both types of potato products are just called chips. Whether it's fried in a deep fryer or pulled from a bag, it's a chip. But of course, people find ways to distinguish. In Australia and New Zealand, you might hear hot chips for fries and just chips or potato chips for the bag kind. Oh, and if you're in northern New Zealand, people sometimes lovingly call them chippies. Over in Bangladesh, the word is usually chip or chips, sometimes even crisps, pronounced a bit differently like crisp. And of course, locals also call them aloo bhaja, which literally means fried potato. Let's take a detour into German-speaking countries where things get structured a little more. In Germany and Austria, chips are called Kartoffelchips, potato chips in the most literal way possible, usually shortened to just chips. But don't worry, they pronounce it almost exactly like in English. Switzerland takes a slight turn with Palms chips, but it still means what you're thinking, the thin, crunchy kind. And here's a cool one. Across the former Yugoslav countries, they also use the term chips, keeping it globally consistent with a European twist. Now let's head down to Brazil, where they really went creative with the naming game. There, if you're eating a more rustic, homemade style potato chip, it might be called a batata portuguesa, Portuguese potato, especially if it's relatively smooth on the edges. But if the sides are crimped or have that wavy biscuit-like look, that's a batata prussiana, or a Prussian potato. Makes sense. But for the American style, uniform, mass-produced kind made from a puree-based dough, that's when you get the term batata chips, or just chips. It's the modern industrial version, straight from the factory to the bag. So whether you're crunching on chippies in New Zealand, eating crisps in Dhaka, or munching on batatas in Sao Paulo, there's one thing that's clear. We all love fried potatoes. We just can't seem to agree on what to call them. And speaking of what we mentioned a little bit earlier, Pringles, which is the next generation of chips. We've already been through the sliced, fried, seasoned, bagged, and globally renamed versions. But now it's time for the engineered snack. The chip that really isn't even a chip. As with Pringles, unlike your classic chip, which starts as a thin slice of actual potato, Pringles, they're made from dehydrated potato flour dough. They're pressed and molded into that unmistakable curved shape, then fried to a golden crisp. The result? A product so uniform you can stack them in a neat little tower, all tucked inside a cardboard canister like they were engineered by snack scientists. Because, well, they were. In the United States, Pringles are branded as potato crisps because legally they don't qualify as actual potato chips. But in the UK, flip it around, they're sometimes called potato chips just to distinguish them from traditional British crisps. aka sliced potato chips. Confused? So am I. But it gets better. Lay's Stacks, same idea as Pringles, dough-based, molded, stackable. Even Munchos fits in here. Though they ride the line as a little closer to the chip side, Munchos use a similar process and come out with deep air pockets and a curve, but still resemble that classic chip look, and very, very salty. Now there's another crunchy cousin in the potato snack family, which is the potato stick, or the shoestring potato. Think of them as super thin French fries, like 2 to 3 millimeters thin, fried just like chips and served up crispy. Over in Canada, there's even a smoky version you can snack from vending machines called hickory sticks. These are typically packaged in rigid containers, though sometimes they come in flexible pouches like your standard chip bag. Way back in the day, potato sticks were sealed in steel cans, but by the 1960s, manufacturers switched to cheaper composite canisters. Basically, early version of the Pringles tube. One of the big names, Reckitt Benckiser. They led the category with Durkee potato sticks and French's potato sticks, but stepped away from the business in 2008. French's, they made a comeback in 2014, giving potato stick fans a reason to celebrate. And there's even a bigger version of the potato stick, about 1 centimeter thick, called Andy Cap's Pub Fries. Everybody's had some Andy Cap fries. They're baked instead of fried, come in all sorts of bold flavors, and take their name and attitude from a long-running British comic strip. In the UK, a similar snack exists under the Smith's brand, now owned by Walkers. They're called chopsticks, usually found in ready salted or salt and vinegar flavors. Now, because snackers are always chasing the balance between taste and guilt, companies also begin making baked potato chips with less fat. And in some cases, they took it even further with fat-free chips made from artificial fat substitutes like Alestra. The result? Well, let's just say Alestra earned a reputation in the late 90s for unfortunate side effects. Words like abdominal discomfort and loose stools hit headlines, and snackers, they quickly learned to read the label before digging in. Flavor? Great. Aftermath? Not so much. Now let's pivot a little bit to some of the other crispy imposters and not quite chips that show up in the UK snack aisles. Monster Munch is a big one, marketed as a crisp, even though it's not made from potato, nor is it chipped. And it's not alone. British shelves are filled with snacks like Watsits, Quavers, Skips, Hula Hoops. These are all marketed as crisps in Britain, but technically speaking, they're not what we'd call potato chips. In fact, British food critic Tanya Gold once argued that Monster Munch is, quote, absolutely not a crisp. Passionate words about a monster-shaped puff. Now, if we look outside the potato family tree, the world gets even more creative. In Korea, New Zealand, and Japan, sweet potato chips are a thing, sometimes even preferred over regular ones. In the UK, you can find parsnip, beetroot, and carrot crisps for a more earthy vibe. And in India, you got a whole shop dedicated to local chip styles. Sure, there's potato chips, but also plantain chips, tapioca chips, yam chips, and even carrot chips again. Basically, if you can slice it thin and fry it, India's got a chip for it. Well, plantain chips, also known as chifles or tostones, they're found across the Americas from Canada to Chile. In the Philippines, banana chips are the go-to, and in Kenya, chips made from cassava and arrowroot are common. And then there's rice-based Pringles. Yep, rice. These low-fat versions have shown up in places like the UK, Sweden, Finland, and Australia, proving once again that chips are no longer just about potatoes, they're about possibilities. Well, we've snacked our way through the invention, the packaging, the flavors, the cultural names, and even the global snack diplomacy of the potato chip. But now, it's time to talk about the one thing that occasionally turns this delicious treat into a controversial topic: health. Most potato chips, let's be honest, they're loaded and loaded with salt, which, while very tasty, has long been linked to health issues like high blood pressure. Researchers at Queen Mary University of London, they pointed out back in 2004 that a small bag of ready salted crisps actually contains less salt than a serving of many breakfast cereals. Yeah, that bowl of quote-unquote healthy morning flakes, saltier than you thought. Still, chip companies haven't ignored the issue. In fact, some have put major money into solving it. Frito-Lay, for example, they spent a whopping $414 million in 2009 on product development. One of their big breakthroughs, a new type of salt crystal, was designed so your tongue notices the flavor more quickly, meaning they could use less salt without losing that signature taste. Why go this route? Well, PepsiCo's research, they showed that about 80% of the salt on a chip doesn't even get noticed by your tongue before you swallow it. So, basically, most of the salt is just going along for the ride and in your stomach. Well, some companies have taken it even further, offering an unsalted version of chips, including the old school British brand Salt and Shake, where you season your own bag using a little sachet of salt that comes inside. Many US brands offer no salt versions too. Not always easy to find, but they're out there for the sodium conscious snacker. But salt isn't the only health headline in the chip world. There was a big scare in 2002 when scientists discovered that frying or baking potatoes at high heat, well, that produced something called acrylamide, a chemical that raised concerns about cancer risk. That triggered international headlines and, in, of course, California, some serious legal action. In 2005, California filed lawsuits against several chip makers, including Frito-Lay, Kettle Foods, and Lance Inc., which is the company behind Cape Cod potato chips. Well, they claim they hadn't properly warned customers that their chips contained high levels of acrylamide, which is a chemical the state classified as a carcinogen in the 1990s. By 2008, the case was settled. The companies agreed to pay fines and to reduce acrylamide levels to below 275 parts per billion. Since then, chip makers have gotten way more careful. Many now use high-tech scanners to spot and remove burnt chips from the production line before they even reach the bag. Oh, but that whole thing about burnt food causes cancer? According to Cancer Research UK, it's more of a myth than reality. So don't worry, you don't have to panic over a slightly overcooked chip. But maybe don't make a habit of it. So before we crunch to a close, let's recap this crispy journey. We started way back in 1817 with the first written recipe for fried potato shavings in a London cookbook. Then we dove into the Saratoga Springs myth. After that, we followed the chip's rise into mass production, from Laura Scudder's wax paper bag revolution to the nitrogen-filled bags we rip open to today. Then came the flavor wars, from cheese and onion in Ireland to paprika chips in Germany and crab-flavored Lay's in Russia. We went international, we went engineered, talking Pringles, stacks, chip sticks, hickory sticks, even baked low-fat and Alestralace versions. We explored what different countries call these things: chips, crisps, batatas portuguesas, kartoffel chips, chippies, and even crisp. And we ended up here, talking about how science and law stepped in to reshape the snack aisle. So yeah, a lot of history in a humble bag of chips, from sliced potatoes to salty scandals. The potato chip isn't just a snack. It's a story of invention, tradition, marketing, global flavor, and crispy obsession. This has been Who Came Up With That, and I'm your host, Bang Biscuit, reminding you, every bite has a backstory. We'll see you next week, and remember to leave in the comments whether you like one of these longer versions or the straight, to the point, less detailed, about 13 to 15 minute version. So let me know in the comments, and like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and all that good stuff, and we'll see you next week on Who Came Up With That.